Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics, and in this video we're going to be talking about what happens when your fish tank filter breaks. What do we do about it? So stay tuned. Alright, so I think the first thing is don't panic. Often we have more than enough biological filtration going on in our fish tank, and one of the things I think we need to appreciate is the fact that the biological filtration that's happening isn't just happening in your filter, it's happening on all the surfaces of your fish tank, be that decorations, rocks, the glass, fake or real plants. You've got microbes that are capable of doing the nitrification process all over your tank. That is going from ammonia to nitrite and nitrite to nitrate. And that's one of the things we worry about the most when a fish tank filter breaks is, are we going to get an ammonia spike? Are we going to get a nitrite spike? And are the fish going to die as a result? So let's take a look at some things you can do. I think many of us have been in a situation where we walk by a fish tank and all of a sudden something's not right. It's a little quieter than it normally is. The water's not moving. The next thing you know, we look in there and the fish are kind of near the surface, and that can be a very unsettling thing. So I think the first thing we want to do when we realize a fish tank filter is broken, and by the way, some of this can also apply if the power goes out and your fish tank filter is also not running. So we've already said the bacteria are everywhere. They're not just in your filter. The problem is those microbes, just like your fish, they need oxygen in order to survive. So step one, we've got to get oxygen into that water column. Now, a lot of times, just having the water movement from a hang-on back filter or a canister filter, that in and of itself supplies surface agitation that is really good at gas exchange. So oxygen in, CO2 out. So we want to make sure we can get that gas exchange going again. So one of the things I highly recommend if you have a fish tank, or multiples even, is make sure you have some type of an air pump with an air stone and some air line, just so that we can get oxygen in the tank. If your main filter goes out, that's going to do a couple things. One, it's going to supply the fish with oxygen, which is super important. And two, it's going to supply the microbes with oxygen as well. And that's going to relieve some of the stress of when your fish tank filter goes out. We don't necessarily have to jump up and run out right away and find a new one. The next thing you may want to consider is what you do with the media inside your filter. Now, if it's a hang-on back filter, we want to try to get, if you've got bio rings in there or maybe a sponge, let's get that out of that filter where the water is very stagnant and put it in the tank as best we can without trying to cloud up the tank and introducing a bunch of detritus. Let's put it in the tank where there's some oxygen. Now, if we've got an air stone, maybe what we want to do is try to hang that filter bag with the bio rings or our sponge near the surface, but close to where the airflow is coming up through a sponge filter or an air stone. That's going to give the bacteria the oxygen that they need to continue doing the nitrification process, ammonia to nitrite, nitrite to nitrate. The other thing that we want to do is reduce the bioload. So that means reduce the amount of feeding temporarily until you can get a new filter up and running. And so that means we're feeding less, the fish are eating less, and so they're producing less waste. That also will ensure that the microbes that are in the tank already can keep up with the bioload that's there. The other thing you want to consider, in some of our older videos, you'll notice that we have a sponge filter that isn't cycled, but behind that we'll have some cycled filter media from another filter. So maybe some filter floss or a sponge that came out of a hang-on back, and we kind of wedge that between the filter and the glass. That ensures that the bacteria is getting a little bit of water flow next to that sponge filter, and eventually that bacteria will grow onto the filter, the sponge filter itself. So even if you have a sponge filter that's not cycled, if you can get that in the tank to get the water flow going and put some of the used media, maybe you've got the bio rings in a filter bag, put that right next to the sponge filter just to keep them oxygenated, that's going to go a long way in making sure those microbes stay healthy and can continue to do the nitrification cycle. All right, so we recently made a video on is it possible to overfilter a fish tank. I'm going to put that in the upper right hand corner as well as in the description below. And in that video, I make the point that the vast majority of fish keepers probably have more than enough filtration when it comes to biological filtration. However, that doesn't mean you can't have more than one filter on a tank. And in fact, we've done that in a number of our tanks in the past. So as a good example, at one point we had a 75-gallon tank. And on that 75-gallon, it would have been more than sufficient to have one, let's say, Penguin 350 on that tank. That filters 350 gallons of water per hour. Instead, what we did is we actually went with two Penguin 200s. And the idea there is that we had redundancy. If one filter went out, the other one was still running, and it would probably carry the bioload until we could replace the second one. It's certainly something you can consider. Now, you don't have to have two hang-on-the-back filters, but maybe you've got a sponge filter plus a smaller hang-on-the-back filter. So instead of buying the really big filter for your tank and only having one, maybe what you do is you have two smaller ones so that the redundancy is built in. When something goes wrong, you have a backup. In our fish room, we have that as well with our central air pump. It powers all of the fish tanks in our fish room. It supplies air to everything. If that were to go out without a backup, we would probably lose a lot of fish. However, we have a second air pump, just in case that one goes out, that would be sufficient to power at least one sponge filter in every tank that we have. So the bottom line is this: if your filter breaks, get air in the tank, and that's going to buy you some time. Eventually, yes, you're probably going to want to replace the filter that is broken, but at least the air will keep your fish alive, and it will probably keep the microbes in the tank with enough oxygen so they can continue to do ammonia to nitrite, nitrite to nitrate, get the media out of that filter, get it in the tank, either close to the surface where there's going to be some gas exchange but still submerged in the water, or next to the air stone so they're getting plenty of oxygen. Hope you found this video useful, and if you did, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.